Wayne Christian. He is our railroad commissioner, and he is going to share all of his knowledge about Texas oil and gas industry.
That's right. If I share all of my knowledge, it'll last about 5 minutes, so I'm going to go Honored to be here with a bunch of heroes here, people that care. Understand, I always talk about I'm preaching to the choir when I come to a group like this. So if I insinuate anything that you're not doing enough, basically our friends and our neighbors, we all are aware of this. We have let the country go a direction it should never have gone. And it's we the people, and why your organization is so valuable. And anyhow, my name is Wayne Christian. I am currently the chairman of the Texas Railroad Commission. Now, first, my history is, if you could care less about this, but I'm as old as Tan Parker. Tan and I served together in 1997. We were recruited into the Texas House of Representatives. That's old Tan. He doesn't look it because he dyes his hair and glues some on somewhere, something like that. So, Tan, tell me you said it. Tell him I said that, please. Tan's a great guy, good friend. Drew Springer, your senator, super guy. I think Mr. Buckley is also one of your representatives from here. And who else we got Mr. Patterson. And Mr. Patterson is a real hero in my book because he defends oil and gas tremendously in the House. So all those are great people. And God bless you for having those people as representatives. Now, who's going to take Tan's place in the House? Do we know yet?
Yeah, I'm Oliver Gardner.
Okay, I guess they're redistricting all together. And redistricting kind of took me. That's it. Well, Tan and I came together back in the House in 1997. I was the first Republican since Reconstruction from Deep East Texas. My home's near Nacogdoches, Center, Texas. I was born and raised in the metropolitan statistical area called Tenny Hall, Texas. Population 1,097. I'm one of the few people that moved uptown to get to Center. Okay? Anyhow, I served there for about 14 years in the Texas House. I ran for Congress during that time and lost after redistricting. That's when the Democrats, and this is history, when we first took over as Republicans in the Texas House, some of you may remember that have the same color hair as me. The Democrats all ran off to Ardmore, Oklahoma and listened to Willie Nelson sing songs. Remember that? They locked me and Tan and the rest of us up in the Capitol, wouldn't let us out. And I kept asking, hold it. We didn't break the law, they did. Why are we locked up here, right? Was that time. So I lived through that. The Republicans taking control in that time. And then we found out that we need more conservatives, such as true Texas values are about. And we organized the Conservative Coalition. I became chairman of the Conservative Coalition, 10 on the board of directors. And we served and tried to recruit more members for the conservative cause. And what had happened, they had taken what's called the Conservative Coalition, and it had become Rhino and Democrat cover. Because if I went home and said, I'm a member of the Conservative Coalition, well, whoop-de-doo, what does that mean? So we kicked everybody out, Tan and I, and we reorganized and said you have to have at least a 70% voting record for conservatism to be on the Conservative Coalition. And this is true. Back in 27 or something like that, we grew that to be the second largest caucus in the Texas legislature. Think of that. Larger than the Democratic caucus. We had the Republican caucus, the Conservative Coalition, and the Democratic caucus was smaller. And that was conservatism. And that was in a day and age that really, it was a different world. Today, I don't know how to define what's going on with all this. My truth is my truth. I mean, I'm glad. If they have the nouns, the he, she's, whatever, if they have that, give me the adjectives. I want to be young and handsome. I can do that if I've got the adjectives to it, right? Anyhow, we served there together. Tan's a great guy. We ran for Congress and lost to this guy named Louis Gohmert. Nobody knows him, So I always tell Louis, we became such friends doing that because we were both such right-wing extremists and proud of it that we started writing with each other and saying, okay, you get my seat. And look, by the way, and I'll tell Louis this day, I won 11 counties. He only won 3. Tyler, Longview, and where all the people lived. Okay? So anyhow, he's a great friend, super guy, and I look at what his future might be in that. But anyhow, I've been beat several times, and I tell you what, in studying old scripture, and I talked to me and Ms. McCarthy have a common old fellow that we appreciate as a pastor years ago, as an evangelist, Henry Blackaby, wrote Experience of God Knowing Him in the Will of God. And it's been a great thing. Julie has been a great part in her life. And it's kind of interesting because he kept talking about God uses the nobodies from nowhere to accomplish his purposes. And Henry said that the First Baptist Church of Dallas would never be the place that has the biggest revival. It'll be the nobodies from nowhere, because God used the nobodies. King David, he was a murderer, an adulterer, the least of the litter, the last of the bloodline, and he became God's favorite, right? You look at Moses, he was the hero that brought the people out of Egypt, and he was a murderer, okay? King David was an adulterer and a murderer, and you've got Gideon, the great victories he won for God. Well, he was a coward hiding in the basement, God had to drag him out, and what's it? So I like being that kind of company. God likes the nobodies from nowhere, and I enjoy being a nobody, and I hope I'm amongst a bunch of nobodies tonight, because that's who God uses to win the biggest victories. Think of that. I had a whole preacher a couple of weeks ago, and it said something very interesting to me, because they've been rapping about Donald Trump and how unpresidential he was, and how rude and how arrogant and how offensive he was. And he said, we didn't hire him to be pastor and chief. You know, and yes, he was reading there. And he said, but you got to understand, Moses, King David, Gideon, all the people God used for the greatest results in Scripture would not be eligible for employment in my church. Think of that. Think of that. It's amazing. So now that you know I'm a religious nut, let me just say I'm a right-wing extremist political nut too. I'm a old stockbroker, banker, and I come in, and there's a great guy, and if you ever get to listen to it, listen to Bob McEwen. He's a former congressman during Ronald Reagan's term. He's an economist by trade. Has the greatest video, and David Martin has it in Wall Builders, and you can Google it. And the video, if you ever have time, is called Politics Easy as Pie. Politics Easy as Pie. It's the best 20 minutes or so, I promise, I've ever spent from a political speech. And he makes them about money. Let me tell you what conservatism is. There's first party, second party, third party money. Okay? First party money. It's my money. I'm going to use what I buy with it, so I'm concerned about the price and the quantity and the quality, right? My money, I'm going to use second party money. Second party money, it's my money, so I'm still concerned about the price. But I'm going to be a Christmas gift for Aunt Sadie. I'm going to buy her a green sweater. I really don't care about the quantity and quality. I just care about the price, right? Second party money. Then there's third party money. Third party money where it's not my money, so I don't care about price. And I'm not directly going to use it, what I'm buying with it, so I'm not concerned about the quantity or the quality. Now here's what's important for us to understand as conservatives. Every government purchase is a third party purchase. Let that sink in. So they're not concerned about the price. They're not concerned about the quantity and quality. So that's why we as conservatives have to ride the government continually, because, it's just another billion here and billion there. You know, it's interesting. When I first went in, $100 was a lot of money to me. You get the state government, and it was thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands. Now the state pays millions of dollars for stuff. Oh, we're going to put $10 million here, $10 million there from the state. You get it. And now it's got to billions. Billions of dollars in this, billions of, right? That's what we hear from the state. The government is in what? Trillions. They got the trillions. What, 7 trillion plus during all the COVID mess that they gave away to everybody and their dog? And it's just amazing, folks, how out of control now government money is. Yeah. All right? That's the fiscal part of it. And what we believe is conservatism. That's great. Then there's another part that you'll find that and just kind of set the stage for where I see conservatism, so you know where I'm coming from. I think a lot of the problem we have are people that are unwilling to fight real battles. Okay? Unwilling. And here's the reason. To have integrity. Integrity is what we need in government and any job we have. That chair's got to have integrity. If it had 3 legs, it'd fall down. It wouldn't have the integrity to hold it up with what it claims to do. Yeah. That's integrity. 2 parts to integrity. One is morality. Yeah. And most people, seriously, are moral because they know they'll get arrested or shamed or something like that, at least used to, for being immoral. Okay? The other part is called character. Having integrity. Morality and character. What's character? Character is having the courage to do what's right, even when it may not be popular, or politically correct. And sadly, we have a lot of folks that go to government Thankfully, not your folks here that I just mentioned. You've sent a brave crew. But many people go to Austin or Washington, and they sit back and they won't do wrong, but they don't have the courage to stand up and go against the press, the media, the lobbyists, the contributors, the big companies, and the political situation, and have the courage to stand up. Louis Goldman used to tell me, said, Wayne said, if you're not willing to stick your head up, you ain't gonna get shot at. And that's exactly what we need, is more politicians and leaders in every position, from school board, city council, to state government, to federal government, that have character, are willing to stand up. Yeah. So that's kind of a base on what we're doing. What's the Railroad Commission? And we run all the railroads in Texas? Not anymore. It's important for me to make you understand that, because most people sadly don't understand what the Railroad Commission is. And the Railroad Commission, by the way, let's just say it's responsible for 1 out of 10 jobs, direct or indirect, in the state of Texas, 1/3 of the state budget, all the rainy day fund, which is that emergency fund where we do stuff other states can't do, and all the permanent school fund, all of the land fund, all of this comes from oil, gas, and coal. Okay? That evil stuff that Outdoor's been fighting forever, and AOC is yelling about oil, gas, and coal. Okay? We've been around for 130 years. That's what the number is there when we first organized in Texas.
On the
the
other
oldest
side.
regulatory agency for oil and gas on the planet Earth. Think of that. State of Texas. This is what makes Texas, Texas, is oil, gas, and coal. And just think of that, what that means. It's interesting to me to remember back in World War I, there was up here not far from here, up in the Ranger Field in Eastland County, was the largest discovery of oil in the United States. In World War I, in the museum in Washington, D.C., is a thank you letter to folks in Eastland County from the European Commonwealth at that time. After World War I, it says, thank you for the wave of oil that came to help win World War I. World War II, Texas, East Texas oil field. Biggest find in world history. Okay? Big Itch and Little Itch pipeline carried 80% of the oil and gas to our Allied forces in Europe during World War II. Winston Churchill, I got the poster in office of this quote. And it's quote, Winston Churchill, it was a sea of oil from East Texas that helped win World War II. Okay? Let me give you another. And this is what people aren't. I remember Jimmy Carter back whenever he was president. I can remember that. He got on TV and said, we had 8 years of oil and gas, and we're going to be out of it. We've got to turn the thermostats up and live right. I remember that. 8 years at that time. Al Gore said back when he was just vice president, I think, he said that we had 10 years left before the seas would engulf all the coastline. You know, I'm old enough to live through 3 generations of folks saying I was going to die in 10 years, and I'm still around. Okay? And the environment is that crazy. But you got on 2017, November, I was elected your Texas Railroad Commissioner. Okay? In November of 2017. Literally, this is absolutely a fact in my hand. I ain't lying to you, because this guy's from Southwestern Baptist Theological Cemetery, right? And I wouldn't lie to him. I'm a Southern Baptist, and you know, okay? And I mean, that's your catchery. That's it. That's it. But let me tell you, on the day of my election, my wife and I were driving back home to Center from Austin, and the day following, the Tuesday, it was a Wednesday, and at Bastrop, Texas, or outside of Austin, Texas Oil and Gas Association was having a meeting. And so I said, well, it'd be nice if we just stop by there and thank Todd Staples and all the group for your new commissioner, and thank y'all for helping me get to where I'm at, blah, 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 kiss up a little bit. And on the radio, this is a fact. First news item was, boom, after a decade of legal suits in Washington, the EPA has dropped the suit against Texas for the Denton, Texas earthquake lawsuit. I mean, Tenson's 10 miles from where I live, right? So, I mean, that's pretty neat. We dropped an EPA case after 10 years. The next thing, with my hand up, the discovery in Midland, Texas, of the largest field in the history of oil. So I walk into Texoma. I said, first day on the job, I settled a lawsuit of 10 years and found the largest amount of oil in history.
Tell Jim to
I want
turn
you to
off
think
the
of this,
projector.
folks. They started digging on that field, and they found it first. It was about, I think, 40 billion barrels. Now understand, Prior to that, the entire reserve of the United States of America from Alaska to Brownsville was 34 billion barrels. Got this? That was the entire reserve. And so when we first started digging on that West Texas Permian Basin oil find, it was 40 billion. 1 billion. And then we got to digging. And you went through layer number 2, and it came out with 60 billion. Then it got 80 billion. Now I'm getting to an old gentleman that had been mining oil there forever. That's probably the long-term mining oil, drilling oil, digging oil, whatever it is. He's been buying oil for a long time. And he said, Christian, the people that have been working with me for 50 years here say, we got 200 billion barrels of oil that's potentially in this ground. And I said, man, that's over my head. Nobody will ever believe me say that. So a couple of weeks later, I was down in Houston at an oil company. And the president of the oil company, I was looking at it, I said, oh, Mr. So-and-so out in Denton was telling me he thought there was 200 billion barrels out there. And the president said, no, he's wrong. He is wrong. And he called his folks from downstairs, and they came up with all these rolls of fancy paper and stuff and said, it's 230 billion barrels. I want you to get this picture. God gave us in Texas World War I, the largest discovery in the history of the world, World War II, for a second time for a battle, the largest discovery in the history of Texas. And what happened during World War II? What did the responsibility of those people, my dad, and that generation, we call them what? What did they ask of that largest land of history? Were all riches and wealth? No, they asked for a house, Mom did, with a picket fence, and Dad to make sure his kids was better off because he lived through the Great Depression and he didn't want anything else. That's all they wanted. And we called them because of their responsibility. They led the development of the first international superpower in the history of mankind that has been the most lenient, charitable, giving, and faithful country in the history of planet Earth. That's what they did with that refinement God gave us during that time. And we call them what? The greatest. You got it? Ladies and gentlemen, for the third time in history, God's given us a triple decker. Think of this. The battles we face right now are unprecedented. At every level. You know, I can sit there all night and get you depressed as all get out like you do when you watch the news. It is insane. Right? It is insane the evil that's going on here. But God, for the third time, gave who? Texas. And this time it's West Texas. Now, do we have any responsibility for this, folks? You better believe it. What are our children and grandchildren going to say about the way we handle this third gift from God? It's kind of heavy, isn't it? What are we currently allowing to do? Well, how many of y'all are for dirty, rare, expensive energy in the state of Texas? Think of it. How many are for that? Let me see you. Y'all ain't for all the above energy in Texas? Dirty, expensive, and rare. Can't find it. Okay? No, we're for cheap, predictable, plentiful, and reliable energy, aren't we?
Yes.
Huh. Is that what you hear all of our politicians and leaders say?
No.
Do you know we're the only state in the country, that does not pay the lowest spot market price for your electric bill? Do you know that? Only state in the country. Why? 20 years ago, our good friends, 20 years ago in the Texas legislature, Republicans, decided we're going to be the grand capital of the world. Not $66 billion the last 20 years, we now find ourselves as the grand capital. Okay? Why? Because we had this concept of legislature passed 20 years ago that we want to have wind and solar here, so we make sure the day before electricity is bought, we see how much wind, how much solar, and ERCOT makes sure that's all purchased first before anything else. So if the wind blows, the sun shines, we get electricity. If it don't, sorry, guys in natural gas and coal and nuclear, y'all are tough up. So we had this little chill event going on. I don't know if y'all had it out here. I wouldn't believe it today, right? We had this little chill event. I was 5 days by myself without electricity. electricity, in the house. That my wife sent me to cut the water off the night before, and you couldn't get home afterwards. So I was there, a happy camper. But it got so freezing back in February, a year and a half ago. Is that right? And I'm getting old, I forget how long it's been. I just know I was cold for 5 days without any electricity. And I don't want to do that again. But all of a sudden, now, what was wrong with that? Well, I did this little article right after it in March. I've got some copies over here. The letter, believe it or not, this is what's crazy in the world. I was published by this little newspaper called Wall Street Journal. And the title of my article there was on March 19th, less than a month after the event, right? And I said, basically my article was, we have spent so much money on unreliable energy, wind and solar, that we let the pilot light go out on reliable energy in Texas. And that was storm here, okay? Okay. I'm glad to say, where is that? Oh, it's on top page. Governor Patrick, on May the 14th of this year, agreed with me. It was nice. And I appreciate it very much. It makes me feel less of an idiot that I've felt for the last year saying this stuff. And we have a letter here back on July 15th of 22. California power problems hit Texas. In case y'all wondered, it ain't the hot air from politicians tonight that's most dominating here in Denton, right? It's kind of outside in nature doing it. And this past Sunday in the Wall Street Journal again is an article called The West Climate Policy Debacle. And this ain't just a reporter, folks. This is the Wall Street Journal editorial board. This is the most dominant, respected political force that has ever stood and said this. And basically is, we have spent so much money, read the article at the Wall Street Journal, we have spent so much time, energy, and all, wanting more windmills and solar panels, that we are losing democracies all over the world. Over in Germany, in Europe, they're saying shut down their nuclear, shut down their coal, shut down all the electric generation, except we're now going to have windmills and solar panels. And so Germany did that experiment, as did England, as did Europe. And guess what happened? All of a sudden, the price of their electricity and natural gas went up over 10 times. The number one import to Germany today are wood pellets. Why? Because middle class and poor people can't afford electricity or natural gas or heat in their homes. And so they're now I want you to know, my dad and his 3 brothers had a little farm in Tingham, Texas 100 years ago. And what was 85% of Texans at that time were in agriculture. 85% of Texans. They worked 6 days a week, daylight to dark, got off on Sunday, and back to work on Monday morning. Daylight to dark, 85% of Texans. The life expectancy was 47 years of age. There were diseases for which were no cure. Almost every family there had a child under 5 that passed away because of diseases they couldn't cure, because during the winter they couldn't get warm enough for a small baby, or the old and infirm, and the death rate was tremendous. 47 years of age, almost every family had a 5-year-old or below, and elderly people passed away because of the largest environmental death rate was from lack of heat. Okay? And then also the other was lack of heat and starvation. You didn't raise crops. If the crops didn't come in, I'm sorry. There wasn't enough food to feed everybody as much as they needed to stay healthy. And so people died in Texas 100 years ago. And how did they heat and cool and feed their home? What was their energy source? Wood. Wood. 100 years later, what are the greedy want us to go back to? Let's see. Today, average lifespan is 77 years of age and going up. There's diseases for which there was no cure. They're just everyday medical breakthroughs on what can be cured. People don't die of starvation in this country anymore. We have an obesity problem. Okay? And we don't freeze to death anymore in this state. What do we have? We gripe because the thermostat's a degree or two too cold or too hot, don't we? Folks, what's the difference in those 2 words? Oil, gas, and coal. And what the Wall Street Journal is saying is we in the United States, in this free world, with the Paris Accord and all this, are telling these underdeveloped countries over in Africa and across the seas and everywhere that you don't get coal. You don't get what we have. You have to wait and use windmills and solar panels. There are missionaries that I talk to that go over the annual doctors, and they literally come back and their biggest complaint is they are told they can't carry any gas engines, diesel engines that generate electricity. They have to be wind or solar. And they have to get up doctors, missionaries, and say, I have to decide each morning, am I going to perform surgeries and get the lights on and the other equipment on, and let the refrigerators go without electricity and spoil all the medications I've brought over and let people die? That's a decision they have to make every single day. That's insane. But that's what we're doing with all this Green New Deal junk. And I got other words for junk. Okay? Now, it's easy to get very depressed on this kind of stuff. I don't. I get excited. I get excited because, who just said in the Wall Street Journal this is a bunch of junk? We were destroying the democracies of the world. Right now, every country is being told by the World International Banks, okay, who give funds. They're saying if you don't get your ESG score up, now ESG is something invented by Larry Fink with the World Economic Forum that says you're going to have environmental, social, and governance funds of who gets money and who don't. Boom. Guess what they first hit? Was energy. And I get a call from up here at Energy Transfer, which is the biggest pipeline company, and they say, Christian, they're cutting off money to finance all of oil and gas in the United States on these environmental, social, and governance funds. And I got to look and I said, okay, and they're using, dig this, 2017 we discovered the largest find of oil in history, and they're using all the flaring that's going up from the Permian Basin on the news media there in New York, California, and all this, to say, they're destroying the atmosphere in West Texas. It's terrible. Let me give you a fact from the Railroad Commission of Texas, okay? At its worst, during the early stages, and we're talking just before COVID, flaring was 2.7% of all natural gas being produced in the state of Texas. 2.7%. During COVID, it went down to 1.9%. As of January of last year, it was at 0.7%. It went down to 0.5%. Went down to less than 0.25% today. But they have used that less than 1% to shut down 90% of funding for oil and gas in the United States of America. 90% in 5 years. Okay? That's Larry Fink. Get his name. It means something. BlackRock Financial. Oh, by the way, the World Economic Forum is an organization that meet every year, and John Kerry is our representative there, and the members of the board of directors you may be familiar with: Al Gore, George Soros, Bill Gates, and Larry Fink. Okay? And what their agenda is literally this. It's called, and they invented ESG funds. They're attacking energy, and their goal, I wonder if this is familiar, is to get the price of oil high enough where markedly then electric is competitive. Have they been successful? Okay. They also are changing their economic system, and I'm a banker. We built our forefathers built this great country on the what's called free market capitalism. Have you ever heard of that statement? Free market capitalism is where you and I, the shareholders, the owners of the businesses, the shareholders, we benefit and get the profits and reap the rewards in our retirement system, our 401ks, our plans, our savings, whenever the companies do good. We, the shareholders. And that has created the largest, freest, richest country on planet Earth. Okay? Now people think, well, we're not really all that rich. Well, look at these palaces in Saudi Arabia and all this. Let me give you another from politics easy pie example, okay? I steal everything. I invent nothing. I steal it. The United States is the richest country on planet Earth. If you come to this country with nothing on, we'll put clothes on your back, we will give you medical care, put a roof over your head, and food in your stomach. Okay? We are the richest country on planet Earth. The second richest is Western Europe. Okay? Get this picture. If you are the poorest welfare recipient in the United States of America, the lowest poor experience is more likely to eat more red meat, live in more square foot heated area, is more likely to drive a car and have a television and a telephone than the average citizen of the second richest place on earth, Western Europe. Do we take it for granted what God has given us? Yes. Amen. That's unbelievable. That is unbelievable. Okay, where am I? This bad liver. See, I got time. I'm sitting watching this debate over with yet. Let me tell you about oil and gas. Okay, let's take Storm Europe. Let's say, okay, let's compare the green stuff that wants all go to. By the way, back to the ESG routine, Environmental Social and Governance Fund, and then it goes on to something they don't want us to have, and that's food. So Bill Gates is the largest rural landowner in America now. He don't believe in cows, so you ain't gonna get no beef. And the largest amount, I have a son-in-law up in Atlanta, Texas, who is his granddaddy and daddy that had a distributor business. They drive the diesel trucks that carry gasoline at our gasoline stations and diesel at our diesel stations, okay? That's what they deliver. And he comes up, there's this fertilizer that is we import almost 100% of over here to the United States. It's used to crops. And when Russia and the Ukraine shut down as the #1 distributors of that, we lost 70% of that fertilizer. So we planted 30% less corn this year. Okay? Well, that's less food. Okay? Get this picture. And guess what? Biden upped the amount of ethanol to be produced from what remaining corn we had. Because he didn't want the election to come without fighting the price of gasoline as much as he could. Just like he used our strategic reserve and sold it to China to hopefully keep the price of gasoline low. Okay? But not only does it shorten food, and the President of the United States stand before us, now this is quoting Biden, we will suffer a decade of food shortages and fuel shortages.
Whoa.
Okay? That's what the President reminds us. Well, not only is that fertilizer from the Ukraine and Russia used for corn fertilizer and fertilizer for our crops, it also produces, is the only producing of our diesel starter fluid in diesel trucks. And I didn't know this. The EPA passed this rule, which is logical. There was too much smoke coming out of tailpipes, so they decided instead of being able to start your diesel vehicle, you got to add this starter fluid. And if you don't have that starter fluid, you ain't starting your diesel truck, your car, nothing else. Got to have that fluid. Guess what? That fertilizer is where it comes from. And guess who owns the distributor of Union Pacific Railroad to 70% of our truck stops for diesel trucks in this country? Larry Fink and BlackRock Financial of the World Economic Forum. Get this picture, folks? Okay, let's go another day. We started this, I'm sorry, I'm adult when I go back and forth. But you talk about these. We have our retirement. We have the liquidity. We participate in the success of this capitalist system. What does our president keep saying? And every time he gets a chance, we're going to move from a corporate capitalism, a shareholder capitalism, is what he says. Shareholder capitalism to stakeholder capitalism. He said that multiple times. Nobody knows what that means. That's what the World Economic Forum has come up with, because shareholder capitalism is me and you are the shareholders. When they make money with the corporations we invest in, we make the dividend check, our retirements go up, our savings go up. Stakeholder capitalism that they're moving to, the president tells us, is the stakeholders will benefit, not the shareholders. Who are the stakeholders? Government, rich individuals, the George Soros, Larry Fink, Bill Gates, those group, and let's see, you got stakeholder capital and government, stakeholder, and the world banks. Now, let me tell you where that goes. This is scary. ESG funds, right now you think of oil and gas, and they cut out 90% in the last 5 years, all that, right? What does S and G stand for? Social and governance. And here's what they're after. They're after you go to your local bank, and you look your local banker right here in Denton in the face and say, I want to refinance my car, I want to refinance my house, I need a little money for a medical need I got and I need a loan. Well, I'd be happy to give it to you, Joe, but your ESG score is not with what we have here at your local bank. And sorry, you don't get the loan. Get this picture? And so this is how the president of these United States is sitting here telling us over the next decade there'll be less energy and less food. Because what does he want? But he says this, but you'll be better off afterwards. How will we be better off? Because we will go to Mr. Government and say, oh, Mr. Government, please give me food. Oh, Mr. Government, please give me energy. And that's called socialism, where we go to the government for everything. Folks, that's what's happening here. And guess who's got to wake up? We do. And these friends of mine as politicians have sat back all these years and said, I ain't going to bring this up, there's too much negativity to it. It blows my mind. And thank God we have the Wall Street Journal. We have finally hopefully the revelations of what's going on right now in just the news itself to say, we got to change our ways. And here's what needs to happen. The last legislative session, I actually got stuff that actually done in Texas. There was an address, and I did 2 letters to the governor, the chairmanships during 2 the regular session and special session, to do away with that law that the legislature passed 20 years ago that gave an advantage to wind and solar on electric selling. No, hey, let's change the law. It was killed by a committee chairman, Republican, in state affairs and thrown out. So since Storm Uri, listen to this, where we proved wind and solar went to 0 and 7% respectively of electric generation, natural gas from 48 to almost 70%. Natural gas saved Texas. And by the way, we don't regulate electricity. We regulate natural gas, minerals, oil, gas, uranium, other stuff. That's what we regulate. We delivered 99.5% of folks that need natural gas during Storm Uri got it. Okay? When the solar capped out, electricity went off. And so what would they tell you? Less reliable energy. We need to have more reliable energy. Since Storm Uri, ladies and gentlemen, unreliable energy has increased in the state of Texas by 17%. At least nationwide, 17. And Texas is the largest part of it. Natural gas, coal, and nuclear have decreased because we had to retire coal mines. They're not politically correct anymore. And we have not built any new reliable energy in the state. So we have more unreliable energy, less reliable energy since Storm Uri. Does anybody that build confidence in you what the heck's going on? Now, and why would any multi-billion-dollar gas, nuclear, or coal company come to Texas if they don't know when they can sell and when they can't? And folks, there's good folks, I think our legislator Tan's going to the Senate. I've talked with him on this, Phil Key, good friend of mine. They're good people we have going to the Senate and legislature, and your representatives are dynamite. Mr. Patterson is super duper on this, okay? And we need more and more encouragement from you, the voters, saying, let's fix this electric grid thing. Because if we don't, folks, we've got more people coming. I mean, this is Tenny Hall math. Think of this. This is public school, a jillion years ago math. And I can tell you something very logical. If you have more and more people, and we're gaining 1,000 a day legally, okay? Legally, we have tripled the equipment used in this state, and engines and equipment go up. More use of it, more people coming in, more use of electricity, and we're decreasing reliable energy. What does that tend to infer we might see coming? Right. So, I hate to be negative on this stuff like that, but y'all, that's the opportunity we have. And we've got to look for that as an opportunity. It really is. Okay, I've yacked on for way too long. I'll take some questions and answers. But not now. Give me one more. How many of y'all were at the state convention? Oh, darn it, you've heard this speech so much.
Sorry,
Let me just real quickly do it. I think it's super. It's about John Quincy Adams. Y'all love that story? I just love that story. And I think I heard it first When I first was elected in 1997, my wife and I went to James Dobson's Focus on the Family. They had a legislative retreat. And some pastor got up and told the story of John Quincy Adams, and I've distorted it and messed it up time and time. I've looked up right. But here's a true story, and I think this is the encouragement we have as God's people. Okay? John Quincy Adams was the only president that ever, once he served his term as president, that ran for Congress. And so he ran for Congress, got in Congress, and was the elder gentleman. And every Tuesday he would get up and make a motion. Tuesday was make a motion day. And every Tuesday was make a motion day in Congress. Every Tuesday, President Adams would stand up and make a motion to abolish slavery. Okay? And he would do it every week, and it would be voted down. And he knew it was going to be voted down, and it got to be, oh, there comes old John Quincy again. God, what's it going to do? We'll vote it down again. And every Tuesday he'd get up and it'd be voted down. And the newspapers had cartoons across the country of this old president, with a goofy-looking outfit, that he was doing that and making a fool out of himself. And they asked President Adams, the press did, President Adams, why do you keep doing this every time? You know it's going to get voted down. You're a laughing stock. You're in cartoons and newspapers in the country. Why are you losing your dignity on that? And he said this great quote that I love. The work is ours. The results are his. Think of it. Well, while he was in Congress, that ain't all. While he was in Congress, he was a mentor to me. I mean, he was a wise old gentleman. He would help him out. And there was one congressman came, young congressman, and got really be friendly with John Quincy and took up with him, worked with him a lot, and got to thinking a lot of him. In fact, they only served one term. One term as Congress, got beat. Okay? But there was a close enough relationship when John Quincy finally got out of the legislature. When he passed away, that young congressman, the family asked him to be a pallbearer. So real close to this memory. Well, a couple years later, there was this new political party that organized, called the Republican Party. And this long, tall, former congressman was nominated to be president of the United States named Abraham Lincoln. And a couple of years later, he signed the Emancipation Proclamation. The work is ours. The result is God's. Folks, that's what we have before us here. And we better wake up. We had better wake up to what's going on. This is one nation under God.
Yes, it is.
France had the same constitution when ours was built. They have had 20-something constitutions since then. Why? They worded theirs after ours except for one phrase. Under God. And they had it under this legislature, under this group, under that group, under this majority, under that majority. And they followed them all. Ours has stood the test longer than any republic, any democracy in the history of the planet. Why? Because we have the authority of God we come to. And folks, if my people who are called by my name, that's where the answer is, folks. And I'm unashamed to tell you that that's our only hope. But he has given us a solid answer. Okay, I've been mouthed off too long. Questions and answers. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Can you tell us, in the legislature's going to be in January, so what do you see are the top 3 priorities of what you would like to see the legislature pass?
That's a great deal. Let me tell you why it's important to me. Because I didn't see it the Republican Party, the Republican platform, the legislative priorities, nor in the realm of anything of the top 10 issues last session of the legislature in any of the regular special sessions. And I think it's back to Maslow's hierarchy. If y'all are old enough to remember that one, you know, it's where if you don't have food, clothing, and shelter, and all these other desires that you want, ain't gonna mean a whole lot. When the lights go out and we don't have shelter, when food goes away and we don't have food, which is what our president tells us is happening, then the great stuff, and this I have to be very, very careful. So God, thank God for the abortion ruling from the Supreme Court. Thank God for the answer to prayer. Standing up against all this other mess, your critical race theory and all this. Those are very important issues, no doubt. But I'm afraid our targets are on those kind of issues, and nobody, again, is talking about food, clothing, and shelter, which is energy in the state of Texas. And we are headed toward less energy. That's our economy. It's 1/3 of our economy. Let me give you another stat I just got in. When I first got to the legislature, I'm an old banker. And I said, okay, I've been a legislator for 14 years. It's all about money in this town, right? It's all about who gets the money, who doesn't have the money, who has the money, and where it goes, right? And so I went there and I said, the executive director there, I said, the railroad commission, I said, before we go to the legislature, because they're telling us cut 10%, everybody. Tech stop, public safety, education, cut 10% across every commission. And I said, well, the railroad commission has got to be a little bit more financially beneficial than is tech stop, public education, law enforcement, all this. And so he figured it out. I said, for every dollar they allocate over here from the legislature, what's the return to the state? So he did the calculation. It was $52 and something cents for every dollar they funded. I went over there and we got an increased budget that session, okay? I mean, get that return 50 to 1. Well, they just ran the numbers again. And today, with the bounce we got in Texas of the price of oil that's coming in, all this, we have record excesses in approximation. And right now, for every dollar they fund the railroad commission, they're returning over $78.
Wow.
Okay? So, okay, if you're in it for the money, I got it, railroad commission. If you're in it for what I think is food, clothing, and shelter, that's where we're driving the train with the middle of the good Lord gave us. And we have a responsibility to that. So that's kind of a summation or session that I hope they start thinking about, is they're ignoring it. There are no bills, no anything even being mentioned to address these issues on energy I'm talking about.
Well, I'd like to know your idea of what are your proposals?
The first thing is accept that amendment that was thrown away last time that gives wind and solar preference over oil, gas, and nuclear. That's the most important. If we keep going down that road, and then if there's going to be some type of program, we've got to come up with some kind of system to draw reliable energy companies to come to Texas. If it's going to take some type of incentives, I don't like incentives, but if we're talking about public safety, that may have to be considered. So I think that's number one. And then we've got to change the direction of conversation in our legislative hall about we're for a lower carbon future. We're working for a lower carbon. Y'all know how much, and this is what everybody's saying, and Joe Biden's infrastructure bill has something like $90 billion or something like that. It's an enormous amount to do carbon capture. And so everybody on Texas is going to spend all this money to capture carbon, run it out the pipeline, stick it in the ocean floor. Let me tell you how much carbon there is in the atmosphere. Look it up on Google. 0.04%. You could triple it. It won't make a friggin' difference. But we're all listening on television. This is public. We're for a lower carbon future, lower carbon. I don't care. You know, and that's where all the effort money's going. Yes, ma'am.
So you're exactly right about the World Economic Forum, and I think probably most people in this room are totally tracking with you on food and energy and all of our basic needs. Here's our challenge. I'm going to ask you to stop filming right now, okay? Thank you. I appreciate no one else filming. We have a governor who is a member of the World Economic Forum. How on earth are we going to get into bills that will protect the citizens of our state when our governor is not on the same side of the line?
I was not aware of that. I'll need to confirm that.
I looked it up while you were talking, because somebody told me that, and I looked it up, and
Well.
I'll send it to you. That's what we're up against, you know,
Well.
is folks who have heart attacks in the
Governor Abbott,
fights.
of course, has not dealt with me directly, individually. We've not had a conversation. He's been very supportive of my work. Nominated me to the Interstate Oil and Gas Compact Commission, where I filed multiple resolutions against green nuclear, all this other stuff, with his full support. So at this point, I don't have the information to judge. He has helped me, as I just put it like that. But that would be amazing to me. I will check that out.
I'll send it to you.
Of course, you know,
I know.
everything on the internet's always true, right? I mean, we got to double check it, right? I'm serious. I'm respecting it. Yes, I will look into that.
I know.
That would be disturbing.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for the information on the state government incentives, I guess, for solar and wind. I always thought though that was primarily from the federal government where those incentives were coming from.
The last 20 years, it's been $66 billion total, federal and state. The state has been $19+ billion. So your state tax dollar is over $1 billion a year when you consider that the TURP funds in Texas, right, give $10,000 to anybody that buys an electric car. gets 10,000 credit in purchase of that car. Plus, TxDOT is putting in now electric sockets every 50 miles on the state highways. There's all kinds of money going from your state pocket out. Yeah, the biggest chunk is federal. Let me give you this, what's happening in Texas. Last year, and it's probably year before last, but in 1 year, India and China built 288 new additional coal power electric generating plants in China. Okay? And at the same time, they build 60% of windmills, solar panels, and batteries. Right. So we send our money, federal and state, over to China, where they've got slave labor building the batteries, solar panels, and windmills. Bring them over here, get local community tax rebates, because I'm an accountant. Local communities get tax rebates to these wind farms. So we prop those son of a guns from China up, give them our good money that I'm sure they're doing good stuff with, right? And brag about how environmentally friendly and good we are in the state of Texas. Okay, I need to shut up because I've spent my time. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so we say that we're worried about the environment, but yet we know that windmill blades are not recyclable, and we have dumps with these windmill blades. Where are we putting those windmill blades here in here in Texas?
And we've been shipping them off to Wyoming. Wyoming is now full and won't take anymore, and the dumps they have. So we're looking for places to put, the two areas. Let me give you this good.
And the other thing is the batteries that they use, they're very dangerous. I mean,
There's nowhere to put those.
I know we have nowhere to put them.
Yeah.
So we're literally killing ourselves saying we're saving the environment.
It's 25 times more land mass for a windmill and solar power than natural gas. So we're eating up acres and acres. And by the way, real quickly, windmill versus an oil derrick. Windmill lasts from 10 to 15 years, and oil derrick lasts 50 to 70 years, right, to produce energy. We're talking about renewable energy, Okay, it takes $535,000 to take down a windmill, $15,000 to $20,000 for an oil derrick. So get this comparative: 50 to 70 years for $20,000 versus $500,000 for 10 to 15 years. Where's the renewable in that? Well, it's renewable at $500,000 every 10 to 15 years. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to know why Texas has allowed China to buy our land near the airport.
Texas itself, I think, is not directly responsible. That's a federal rule, just like federal border, federal regulation. I understand logic. We're talking about, you asked me the reason. And government is not logical. Government is laws and habits and traditions and all this. And right now, the feds control international trade. International trade is internationals coming in. There is a committee, because I've asked this of our senators. There's a committee in the legislature, there's a lot of trust. I was told back from our senators. There's a committee there that approves or disapproves, and so far they've heard nothing wrong with any of the purchases of power. That's the only answer I received, and that answer, by the way, is like 3 or 4 years ago I asked it. So it may not be current, but that's what happened. There's a committee in Congress that reviews the purchase of land in the United States. A lot of trust in that.
Okay, I've got like 3, but I'll be quick. Okay, so could Texas offer a small business loan to producers? Because right now they can't get through the ESG or the scorecard.
Right.
So if Texas, again, it's a small business loan, it's not a subsidy to maybe recruit others to get, production in Texas.
Sure they could.
Don't have an answer to that.
Oh, no, they could. Legislature can do allocation of dollars for homes and stuff.
And then again, stopping the wind energy subsidies, which is nothing more than a quid pro quo for politicians.
That's right.
I've watched it in Jack County. They have commissioners who already signed contracts with the oil companies, or the wind energy people, and they're, voting on it. And so if you're a farmer and you're downwind from all of that, your crops are gonna be dust. Because, that's still that commissioner. And then access to natural gas pockets. It's hard for me to explain, but like where the natural gas pockets, like in a county, and, that's warm, right? And they use that to, especially in the winter, to keep everything open, like through water flowing or whatever. I can't explain it, I don't remember the words. It's like a thermal thing that's already there naturally. You just kind of tap into that,
See that? He's my staff member. That's right. I think a young guy. Jordan Ballard is a super young man that keeps me sometimes straight, sometimes not. But yeah, these things can be interesting. But let me make it very clear before I leave. The legislature are a good bunch of folks. My last comment. Good bunch of folks. Really are. There's jerks and everything. There's jerks in my family. Part of my family thinks I'm the jerk in ours. Okay? But we made a mistake 20 years ago. It was a mistake. We're going to all make it, right? It's just time for us to correct it. That's all I say. That ain't good or bad, just correct it.
Thank you so much for coming out, Wayne. I know you've got to go, but a great speech, and we certainly learned a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next guest tonight has been a nationally syndicated radio host for the past 25 years, and he is on about 400 radio stations. Y'all please help me welcome Jerry Stewart.
You gotta be straight left. That was a lot. And did you notice he didn't even look at a single one? He was talking, man.
Awesome.
He took notes. Was he a little computer in his brain somewhere? Anyway, so usually when I'm speaking at the True Texas, I just want to make sure this thing doesn't slide past. Would you be able to just like sit right over there? That's good. I got started using the book when they told me that I had a certain length of time. And yesterday, they were giving me little cards. 3 minutes left, 2 minutes left, 1 minute left, 2 minutes left. But they're very nice. But I just gotten to where I want to make sure I stay on track because my mother used to say, Jerry, you talk too much. And I didn't always know when to stop because everything I was saying was a lot interesting and a lot of fun. So anyway, thanks so much, girls, for having me and the whole group and for having Kelly and I. This is my wife right here. And we've just been having a good time. We were in Tarrant County last week. And then yesterday we were in McKinney. And now here we are back here. And so we're just really, really glad to be here. And if all goes well, we'll be out of here by 8 o'clock. Or we'll be ready to take questions or whatever you want. I'm a different kind of a speaker. I don't really have a particular agenda that has to do with anything that's going on in our politics and stuff. What I have found is over the last 23, 24 years is I started out doing radio and people said I sounded like Paul Harvey. And they said, oh man, we like your voice. Come on, tell us some stories. I've always loved a good story. Always loved a good story. And I've found the very best way that you can teach people and make things clear is to give a good story. I mean, look what Jesus did. He told parables all the time. And it worked for him, so I'd like to hope it maybe could work for me. But I do radio programs. We've got about 400 stations. And we've got a company called Salem Radio Network that distributes my programs. And as I said, it's pretty straightforward. But I like to make sure that every story has a point. And it's very interesting how God works, because I had no idea what this gentleman was going to be speaking about. And he's sitting there talking about how we've got to go back to Almighty God or we are through. And interestingly enough, I spent a lot of my studies over the last 20 plus years studying what happened and what were the backstories when we were busy forming a new nation. And the backstories are fascinating because the school books and all leave the impression that God really didn't have too much to do with it at all. In fact, I had one guy that said, show me one place in the Constitution where God's name is even mentioned. And so then I sit down with him and I gave him the whole story. He went, okay. So anyway, I love to talk about the things of the past. And I also find that if we can focus on people people that have already gone through the hard and they made their way to the other side. Do those become the people that we want to mimic or watch and see how they were able to carry? Think about the Patriots. You know, the difficulty that they went through to form our new nation. Think about how the times were so hard. Did you know back when I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, I've got to say it right now. Back when they were going to sign the Declaration of Independence, okay, those 56 fellows, the king had already made it perfectly clear. If you do anything to go against me, I'm going to hang you. You're not going to go to trial or sit in the back of an old dusty prison somewhere. I'm just going to take you right outside and I'm going to hang you. And I'm not suggesting that we want to be in that situation, right now. But what we need sometimes is to get something to set the fire starting. That starts us up and gets us burning, and we can't put the fire out because the fire's got to keep burning for us to be able to accomplish the things that need to be done. And in my heart, that's the way the Lord works. Spent a lot of time praying. We prayed right over here to the corner before everything got started. But then you get up and your heart's just going, man, what am I going to do? How am I going to lead this? What am I going to say? And then you start, listening very carefully and watching very carefully to where God is walking. I don't just take off walking and say, "Oh, come on, bud, come on along with me." It's kind of like when our founding fathers started, they said, "Oh, God is the father of our nation," and I think that is so cool. I think today He's our spare tire. I think we have said, no, we're not always that excited about going where you're driving. So we're going to let you're not going to be co-pilot. Come on, we don't want to hear you in the backseat talking. So we're going to put you in the trunk. So we don't have to hear you. But when we get a flat tire, we want to be able to get back to the trunk and pop you out, and you're going to help us make a way. And it blows me away when I think about all the times that we really, in so many ways as a nation, just kind of pushed him away. And He never has just packed His bags and left. He just keeps being faithful to us. And faithful. So when I think about where we are going, I think about, there was a time during the Civil War that one of the newspaper reporters came to Abraham Lincoln and he said, "Mr. President, is God on your side in this war?" And Abraham Lincoln said, "Sir, it's not important whose side God is on. The important thing to do is to find out where God is standing and go stand and be on His side." And he makes it really clear to us. He started to quote 2 Chronicles 7:14, which I'm going to be mentioning, here in a few moments. And God's given us the answer. He's given us the solution. And so when we listen, that was something else that Abraham Lincoln said. He was at a sermon, and they asked him after the sermon, he said, "Well, what did you think of the sermon, Mr. President?" And he said, "Well, the pastor's delivery was good." He said the content was well researched, but he said the sermon lacked one very important part. It didn't call the people to do something great. It didn't call us to, we're being asked today to be, to not necessarily go down the road of greatness, but yet to follow some leaders that are trying to take us in various places that we know we shouldn't be going, but we're supposed to follow them and be certain that they're going to get us where we need to be. They're telling us that we should, mediocrity. What he talked about over there about, one of these days we're going to be standing and saying, "Please, sir, can I have some food? Can I have some bread? Can I have something?" Instead of the very thing that our founding fathers fought and died for, and that's we the people. We don't need, we're not serving the government is serving us. And did you know why they didn't put anything in the Constitution about term limits? They never believed in a million years that a person would want to be a servant in Congress for 50 years. They never thought about that. It was about being a servant. And it's just all different now. And it's us, someone, we're being made to believe that someone is smarter than us. They must be. Look where they're standing. Look at their position. And so we're just made to feel like that we don't really know exactly if we know necessarily the right way to go. So what I've spent my life doing these last 25 years is just trying to get those pieces of the stories that have happened in our history and to determine, I don't know about you, but I don't want to be France. I don't want to be England. I don't want to be Japan. I don't want to be Canada. I want to be Canada. I want to be America. But I want to be the America that our founding fathers and God intended for us to be. We, the people, walking in a way that when God starts walking, we're following Him. And I know that sounds kind of old-fashioned, but it's just, honestly, it's just the truth. I'll tell you something else that I'm tired of. I'm tired of people trying to say we are can'ts. Americans. And I keep telling people I'm an American. I'm not an American. Don't be telling me what I can't do. Don't be telling me what we don't know how to do. Don't tell me what we can't accomplish. I'm going to be an American. And that's what you folks are talking about here. You're saying we're a small group, but the big saying is that the biggest mistake that you can make is because you can only do a little, you do nothing, and then nothing gets done. And one of the ladies that was speaking up there said, yes, I may be only doing a small thing, but all of the small things will bring us up to having a big thing. You're exactly right. So I was talking a minute ago about the Declaration of Independence, and I was talking about the fact that before they even came together, before they even wrote the Declaration, that they were told, in short words, I'm going to hang you. You'll be sorry. I'm going to crush you if you try to make any trouble for me. So they signed the Declaration of Independence, and then comes the big move. The big move is they have to, after they pass it, they have to sign it. That's the big move. Okay? So you can say something all day long, but when they sit you down at that table to sign that thing, you go, ooh, here it comes. Here it comes. Well, what happens? The very first in their group, the president of this convention, this meeting that they're having, John Hancock. And John Hancock goes up to the Declaration and gets the quill. He signs his name really big. You ever notice that? He signs his name really big? Do you know why he signed his name really big? Some people say he was like some kind of an egomaniac. And that he was, trying to show off. The truth is that the fellow behind him hears him say there, I guess the king should be able to read that even without his glasses. What he was saying was, my life is important. I don't really want to leave, but if I have to fight for liberty and to die for liberty, that's what I'm going to do. Think about another fellow in the Declaration signatures, Charles Carroll. Ever even noticed Charles Carroll's signature? Charles Carroll signed the Declaration of Independence, and he signed in a very special way because he wanted the king to recognize him too. Look tonight on your Declaration of Independence and see the name Charles Carroll, and right next to his name, he gives his address. He gave his address. And he was wanting to make sure that everybody knew that he was serious. He was serious about what he was talking. You guys say, wow, these guys were really, really, really fearless. I'm not sure if the word is fearless. Can you be fearless and brave at the same time? Because if you think about it, this is a good definition that I've heard before. Bravery is not the absence of fear. Bravery is being afraid. Yes. But doing what you have to do in spite of the fear. That's kind of what we're talking about. We don't know at what point we're going to have to take the Second Amendment serious. You know, Thomas Jefferson said, we may need our weapons to go against the government. Now, I didn't say that. That's what Thomas Jefferson said. He said, don't tell us we can't have more guns because we might need them. There's always a price to pay. Always a price to pay for doing the right thing. 1776, when they started the war, George Washington said that he needed a spy to go behind enemy lines and to get certain information and come back and tell him. So we asked for a volunteer for this highly dangerous assignment. Up stepped 21-year-old Nathan Hale. He was so young. All of his life in front of him, but he volunteered. George Washington accepted his volunteering. Well, Nathan Hale did go behind the lines. He did get the information. He was on his way back with the information that George Washington needed. But before he got across the line, he was stopped, found to be a spy, and the very next day, Nathan Hale was hung. And left to hang on that tree for at least 3 days, for everyone to see that the king absolutely meant it. Such a young boy, so much of his life ahead of him. And what did he say? I only regret that I have but one life to lose for my country. So, we look at all of the things that have happened, and you look at the life. A couple of other quotes that I've got, and then we'll wrap up. When they were fighting in the war, I'm not sure if you know this, we know that they didn't have enough troops to fight the British Army. They did not have enough guns. They did not have enough powder. They didn't have enough clothes. Get this. George Washington found that they were cutting up their tents to make clothes to wrap around their feet so that when they walked in the snow, they made tracks in the snow, blood tracks in the snow from their feet. Washington said, to see men without clothes to cover their nakedness, without blankets to lie on, without shoes, so that their marching might be traced by the blood from their feet, and submitting without a murmur, is a proof of patience and obedience which can scarcely be paralleled. Now, here's the wrap-up. They said, well, we're going to win this war, and they finally did. It took 7 years. After they won the war, then they said, okay, now we can eat, drink, and be married. There's nothing to do except put a few pieces of paper together and call it a constitution and be done with it. Everything will be fine. Well, their problem was they didn't want to be like every other nation. They wanted to be we the people. They wanted to be a republic. And they were determined to get it right, so when the Constitutional Congress came together, guess what? They couldn't figure out how to make it just work exactly because they had no instruction manual, because no one had ever done it before. So they decided that they could not come up with an answer, and so they just said, maybe we just need to break this up and not be the United States of America, because the little colonies, states, did not want to be overrun by the big. There had to be something that made everybody have a fair shake. Okay? As they were leaving, Benjamin Franklin, who was there at the Declaration of Independence, he was there going to France, getting them to fight with our guys to win the war. He'd been in all the different places, and he said, I can't believe this. He said, we had all this time, all this effort, all these people, all this loss, all this misery, and now we're just going to walk away from it? And he said, I've got to stand up. So he said, sir, if I may say something. The room got really, really quiet. He said, sirs, I've lived a long time in this world. And if it's true that a sparrow cannot fall to the ground without God knowing it, then surely a new empire cannot rise without his aid. He said, sirs, may we please stop and ask God to help us? May we pray? And immediately, all of the other members of the Constitutional Congress said, yes, we all agree. And they determined at that moment that they were going to make prayer one of the most important things that they were doing while they were busy trying to figure out how to write the Constitution. And guess what? They asked God, and God helped them, and now we got the greatest Constitution in the history of the world. And let me tell you, that fellow that wondered where God was with the Constitution, God wrote the Constitution. And that's what we've got here. So, I would say this. Let us remember that we do have our future in our hands. It's ours to have. 2 Chronicles 7:14, my people, which are called by my name, shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, and I will hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and heal their land. That's our answer. That's our answer. God bless you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Perfect. All right, thank everybody for coming out tonight. I'd like to give our speakers one more round of applause, please. And I hope everybody enjoyed the presentation tonight. And I'd just like to remind you to go to our website and register for our Summer True Texas Workshop. It'll be a very informative weekend, and that is August the 19th and the 20th. So it's a free workshop, and everybody should sign up. So thank you everybody for coming out, and we will see y'all next month.
Thank you.